Wake up. All right, time for convening having arrived. The Senate will come to order. Would ask unauthorized visitors to exit the chamber at this time. The Senate will come to order. Chair recognizes that very lovable and squeezable, the senator from the 53rd.
Good morning, Mr. President. It's a glorious day at our state capitol. And the journal's been read and found to be correct. And I believe it may include the fact that the senator from the 39th did not go to the well in points of personal privilege yesterday.
Well, I hope it did. That was the beginning of a new day and a new era. Thank you, Senator, for your good work. So on the journal, is there objection? Dispensing with the reading of the journal. Reading of journal is dispensed with. Is there objection? Confirmation of journal. Journal is confirmed. All senators having bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk this time. First reading and reference of Senate bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 92 by Senators Hill of the 6th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to elementary and secondary education so as to establish an education savings.
Education and youth.
Senate Bill 93 by Senator Burke of the 11th, a bill to be entitled an act to provide that future elections for the office of probate judge in
Slogo.
Senate Bill 94 by Senators Bethel of the 54th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 17.
Judiciary non-civil.
Senate Resolution 177 by Senator James of the 35th and others, a resolution encouraging the Capital Arts Standards Commission to authorize.
Rules Committee.
Mr. President, this completes the order.
Secretary will read bills, House bills.
House Bill 57 by Representative Dudgeon of the 25th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1.
Regulated industries.
Mr. President, this completes the order.
Reports of standing committees.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Governmental Operations has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report back the same to the Senate with the following recommendation: that House Bill 88 do pass, that House Bill 101 do pass, that House Bill 102 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary Non-Civil has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report back to the Senate the same with the following recommendation: that Senate Bill 8 do pass by substitute, that Senate Resolution 7 do pass by substitute, that Senate Bill 79 do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Stone of the 23rd, Chairman. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Clerk will read bills for the second time.
House Bill 75 by Representative Ralston of the 7th and others. Supplemental Appropriations State Fiscal Year July 1st, 2014 through June 30, 2015. Mr. President, this completes the order.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Chair recognizes the very distinguished senator from the 56th.
Hello. I'd ask for unanimous consent that we excuse the senator for the 14th for business outside.
14th, without objection, the senator from the 14th will be excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 11th from Bainbridge.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 8th for business inside the Capitol.
The 8th, without objection, the senator from the 8th will be excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 50th, distinguished Agricultural Committee Chairman.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 52nd for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator will be excused. Chair recognizes the lovely lady in purple, the senator from the 34th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 10th, business outside the Capitol.
10th, without objection, the senator from the 10th will be excused. Are there any other motions to excuse? If not, the secretary will call the roll of senators. Please signify your presence by voting the A switch. Secretary will unlock the machine. It's now time for our morning devotion. Time for our morning devotion, a time that all senators look forward to as we bring our chaplain of the day. Would ask that senators please take your seats and cease all conversation at this time. Would ask that the doorkeepers secure the chamber as we prepare for our morning devotion. It is now my distinct honor and privilege to bring the distinguished senator from the 21st District to lead us in our pledge and introduce our chaplain of the day. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. If everybody would rise and help join in the pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Georgia flag.
Pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation.
Thank you, Senators. It's a great honor of mine today to introduce my pastor, Dr. Don Martin. I got to tell you, let me tell you first how we met. I was playing golf with my son about 10 years ago, and the starter came and paired us up with Dr. Martin, and we played a few holes, and I hit a ball out of bounds, and I said some words I probably shouldn't have said. And so I'm walking up to the third green, and I said, Don, what do you do for a living? He said, well, I'm the senior minister at First United Methodist, and you might want to come to church. So you might want to join my church. So anyway, we've had a long-standing relationship. He plays golf with my son a lot. He's a very, very good golfer, by the way. But more than that, he's a great minister, and he's really grown Alpharetta First United Methodist. But more importantly, he's been involved in our community. He's on the board of the North Fulton Charities, Drake House, which is Women in Transition, and he's the minister and the chaplain for the Alpharetta Police Department. And the senator from the 56 would agree he's a really great community leader. And also, he's been a very positive influence on me and my family. So you would welcome Dr. Don Martin from First United Methodist Church.
Well, thank you, Senator Beach. It's a real honor to be introduced by you. You're dear to me, and I wholeheartedly encourage you to work on your golf game. Your cussing's just fine. Chantel, your lovely wife, will appreciate that. You know how dear you are to me, and Hunter is, and Courtney, and thank you for being a good member of Alfred at First Methodist Church. I also want to thank Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle for maintaining this sacred tradition. A lot of legislative bodies have disdained it and walked away from it, and he has not. And I appreciate that. Our nation was founded by people who turned their face toward God and asked for his mercy and for his help, and I appreciate him continuing that sacred tradition. His service to our state and to Hall County and Chestnut Mountain is well known, and he already knows how much I love Hall County. I served the Trinity Methodist Church there for 6 years, and when life is done for me, I'll be buried in Hall County, and sometimes I really look forward to that day. I want to thank you for your work. I understand that you come from different areas of the state, and you serve large constituencies, and your work is difficult and complex and as important as rain. And so please know that you are respected by me and that I will, in the days ahead, hold you in my thoughts and prayers. I want to quote one verse of Scripture. It's very simple and concise from the prophet Micah. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? We haven't been here but just a few minutes, and twice we've already used the word justice. In both pledges to our nation and to our state, we've included the word justice. It is the mortar that holds the bricks of our society in place. I recently went with my church on a mission trip to a nation in Central America. It has a coast on the Pacific and the Atlantic. It's beautiful. It's rich with resources. And yet it's struggling to emerge into the world economy and to provide for its people. And what it lacks is what we have: justice. In their nation, police officers are easily bribed, judges are easily swayed, leaders easily bought. Justice, said the prophet Micah, is what God requires of you, that you treat people fairly. My boys grew up playing Little League Baseball in Covington, Georgia. On their team, they had two 12-year-old kids who could really bring the heat. They could throw. And I went to the opening game wondering which one of those kids would walk to the mound and open the Little League Baseball season. As I sat in the stands with hot dog and Coke, neither one of those 12-year-old boys walked to the mound. Instead, the son of the coach walked to the mound to pitch the opening game. And the lady who was sitting next to me said, loud enough for all of us in the bleachers to hear, "That's just wrong." And she was right. Justice means you don't play favorites. You treat people right, without regard to who their daddy is or their granddaddy is or what their color is or what their community is or who they know or who they don't know. You stick with the issue, and you give to the people of Georgia and our community justice. That is, in fact, the mortar that holds the bricks of our society together. We cannot live in community without justice. Show mercy. All of us, when we've done something wrong, want mercy. When I lived in Augusta, Georgia, and served a Methodist church there, I was late to a revival meeting in Lincolnton. And so I was going a little too fast as I rode to that community, about 84 miles an hour, according to the Georgia State Patrol. And as he made his way from his patrol car to my car, I was fumbling for my driver's license and insurance and proof of registration, praying to Almighty God that he would show me mercy. He said to me, "Sir, what's your hurry?" I said, "I'm embarrassed to tell you, officer, but I'm a Methodist preacher, and I'm late to a potluck supper, and I don't much like being late to fried chicken and turnip greens and black-eyed peas and cornbread, and I apologize to you." He said, "Rev, what church will you be preaching at this evening?" I said, "The Bethany Methodist Church." He said, "It's your lucky day, Reverend. I'm a member of that church, and I'll be attending the service this evening. I expect to hear a sermon on mercy." And he walked back to his patrol car. And the most passionate sermon I ever preached on mercy was preached in that church with an officer in the Georgia State Patrol sitting in the rear, grinning like a Cheshire cat. My guess is that in this chamber, occasionally you argue and disagree, and that maybe even occasionally you butt heads with each other. I would encourage you to find an altar and say your prayers and lean a little bit toward mercy. We all want it. We all need it. And we can't really live and legislate and work together unless we show each other mercy. Walk humbly with God. Nothing stinks quite so much as arrogance. And none of us like to be around people who were born on third and walk around like they hit a triple. And sometimes I'm embarrassed to tell you that preachers are the worst of all. In the Methodist Church, we gather annually, usually in Athens, Georgia, for our annual conference. And I was standing a year ago in a circle of Methodist preachers when another Methodist preacher who's very successful and highly disdained walked into our group and began to announce all the things that he had done and accomplished in the year past. And when he walked away, a friend of mine turned to me and said, "There, but for the grace of God, goes God." Walk humbly. Don't get self-inflated. Don't think you're more important than you are. It amazes me when I open the New Testament and read the story of Jesus' baptism. John the Baptist called sinners to step into the River Jordan, and Jesus was not a sinner, and yet stepped into the water and said, "Baptize me, John." And John said, "I will not do this." And Jesus said, "Oh, yes, you will. It will get the ball to rolling, and people will understand that I consider myself just an ordinary Joe, just another citizen among the people." Walk humbly with God. You hold a very important office in this state, a very important office. You're a senator. You have great power, enormous influence. But when you leave this chamber and go back to your community, to your place of worship, you, like everyone else, are simply a child of God. What does the Lord require? Justice, mercy, walk humbly. Do those things, and your life will be full, and the role you play in your community will be strong. I invite you to stand, and I'll offer prayer. Almighty God, we give you thanks for the day and the opportunity to be alive in this great and beautiful state and to have this place of service. Watch over this body and grant them wisdom and clarity. Help them to use their ears as well as their lips as they debate and legislate for the people of this glorious state. We ask in Christ's name. Amen.
I would, if I could have the Senate's attention for just a moment, I'd like to recognize our Doctor of the Day, and to do so, I call upon the distinguished senator from the 39th. Please give the senator your attention.
Good morning, Senators. I am glad to be able to introduce as Doctor of the Day Elizabeth Morgan. She's a world-renowned, board-certified plastic and general surgeon with a broad base of surgical expertise based in the Atlanta market. Dr. Morgan received her undergraduate degree from Harvard University, earned her medical degree from Yale School of Medicine, and she also received a PhD in psychology from the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, and a Master of Public Health degree from the University of California at Los Angeles. Dr. Morgan completed her residency in general surgery at Yale New Haven Hospital and Tufts New England Medical Center, as well as her plastic surgery residence residency at Yale, New Haven Hospital, and Harvard Deaconess Hospital. Currently, Dr. Morgan is in private practice. She's an active member of many professional organizations, including the Medical Association of Georgia. She is a proud resident of the 39th District. She resides in Peachtree Hills, and we appreciate her not only being here today, but her continued advocacy. We see her often here at the state capitol. She has a lot of advice for me, and we appreciate all that advice. Dr. Morgan, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the privilege of being here today to be Doctor of the Day, and I am indeed a proud Georgian, even though I was originally born in Virginia. So thank you so much.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent. So nice to have you. This is a pleasure. Thanks for giving me time. Let's take a picture. Yes, sir. We have a special group we'd like to recognize at this time. If the Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 19 by Senator Unterman of the 45th. A resolution recognizing February 10th, 2015 as Girl Scouts Day at the Capitol and for other purposes. Whereas Honorary Girl Scout Troop 1912, named for the year Juliet Gordon Lowe of Savannah, Georgia, founded Girl Scouts of the USA, a bipartisan delegation of women members of the Georgia State Legislature established by Girl Scouts of Historic Georgia and Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta to educate our great state's legislative body about issues that impact girls and young women. And whereas through the Girl Scouts leadership experience, girls in grades K through 12 discover themselves and their values, connect with other girls, and take action to make the world a better place. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body applaud the commitment Girl Scouting has made to support the leadership development of the girls of the state of Georgia and recognize February 10th, 2015 as Girl Scouts Day at the Capitol. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. We always appreciate recognizing the wonderful Girl Scout organization, all the wonderful things by which they do, and it is now my privilege to call upon the distinguished senator from the 45th to recognize our very special guest.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, it's my honor this morning to present to you Girl Scout Day at the state capitol, and what a great day it is. If you will recall, 2 years ago, we had the 100th anniversary of Girl Scouts in America and in Georgia. So we're absolutely delighted, and the reason being because those of us that are former Girl Scouts understand the importance of leadership skills, self-esteem that Girl Scouts teaches us in the K through 12th grade, but also through the rest of our life. I believe on your desk you may have some famous Girl Scout cookies, and we have a group of Girl Scouters here. I believe if y'all stand up right here on the right-hand side, give them a round of applause. This is a young group of Girl Scouts from Forsyth County in Cumming, Georgia, and we're delighted to have them as representatives for Girl Scouts Day. I believe Shelby is going to have just a little message right here, and we're delighted to have y'all for Girl Scouts Day and look forward to you next year. Shelby?
Thank you for honoring Girl Scouts. It's been a pleasure. Don't forget that it's Samoa's birthday this year.
Very good.
Good job. Let's step down and have a picture together. Wonderful.
They all wanted to speak. No, 40.
I'm sorry?
Samoa and Moses turned 40. Well, those are my favorites. So, yeah, those are. I've got the small, which I'm into.
We have another special group we'd like to recognize at this time, and the Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 64 by Senator Jones of the 25th. A resolution recognizing February 10, 2015 as Georgia College Day at the state capitol and celebrating Georgia College and State University's Quisquicentennial and for other purposes. Whereas since 1996, Georgia College and State University has served the entire state as Georgia's designated public liberal arts university and currently has an enrollment of 6,772 undergraduate and graduate students from all parts of Georgia, as well as other states and nations. And whereas through its teaching, research, and service, Georgia College and State University has enriched the lives of generations of students and produced graduates such as noted author Flannery O'Connor and Georgia's First Lady Sandra Deal, who have made significant contributions in Milledgeville, throughout the state of Georgia, across the nation, and abroad. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize February 10th, 2015 as Georgia College Day at the state capitol and commend Georgia College and State University and its faculty, students, staff, alumni, and friends for 125 years of dedicated service to the people and state of Georgia. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. It's now my honor to call upon the distinguished Senator of the 25th to recognize our great institution along with our special guests.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senate body and people in the gallery. It's a real pleasure and honor for me to stand here before you today and present this proclamation on Georgia College and State University. It's a fine institution located in the old capital city of Milledgeville. It has a beautiful old Southern-style campus that is second to none. And on your desk, we have presented with you a picture of last year's class, which celebrated 125 years of existence. And I hope that you will put that picture up in your office, and when someone asks about it, you just recognize it as the state of Georgia's little jewel, because that's what it is, and it is a fine institution. And if you have not been there before, I recommend you visiting there in the near future. Today is also very special because we have the president of Georgia College here today, Dr. Steve Dorman. And Dr. Steve Dorman has been around the higher education for many, many years. He earned a bachelor's degree in biology from Lee College in Cleveland, Tennessee, and a master's doctorate degree from the University of Tennessee. Prior to coming to Georgia College, Dr. Dorman held faculty administration positions at Texas A&M and the University of Florida. Dr. Dorman has served as the president of Georgia College for 2.5 years, and during that time has challenged an already successful university to aspire to be even better. Dr. Dorman is also joined with Juwan Jackson, who is the president of Georgia College Student Government Association, and also we have making their way over here, the Georgia College students. There's about 40 Georgia College students here today to celebrate this day. And right now, I'd like to recognize those students here on the Senate floor. It is my pleasure now to turn the microphone over to the president of Georgia College, Dr. Steve Dorman.
Well, thank you, Senator Jones, Lieutenant Governor Cagle, President Pro Tem Schaefer, Majority Leader Calzert, Minority Leader Henson, and Senator Jones, and honorable members of the Georgia Senate. Thank you so much for honoring Georgia College with this resolution and for recognizing Georgia College and State University's Quisquicentennial, our 125th birthday. I also want to thank both current and past members of the Senate for the support you've given our university through the years. I'm proud to be here this morning representing Georgia College, an institution that has a great legacy of service to the state of Georgia. Our modern history has been even more impressive. Since 1996, Georgia College has been tasked with the important duty of being Georgia's public liberal arts university. And in carrying out this mission, Georgia College has continued to attract some of the best and brightest students from throughout the state. The student body this year hails from 139 of the 159 counties, 30 other states, and several foreign countries. We take our responsibility seriously to help educate and nurture these students and to become the leaders of tomorrow. And at the Capitol today, We have over 50 student leaders from Georgia College, each with a unique story and high aspirations. On the rostrum with me today is one of these students, the president of our Student Government Association, Mr. Juwan Jackson. Juwan is a political science major from Macon, and like many of our students, his leadership skills began to show in high school, where he was a state leader in the 4-H program and involved as a junior campaign manager for 3 political candidates. On the Georgia College campus, Juwan started a collegiate 4-H chapter and has helped to grow it into the 2nd largest collegiate 4-H chapter in Georgia. He's been a leader in our student-led nonpartisan Community Choices, Your Voices program that has hosted numerous forums and debates from local elections as well as both Republican and Democrat congressional primaries. For his work in helping to encourage informed citizen participation, Juwan recently received the Newman Civic Fellows Award. Recipients of the Newman Award serve as national examples of the role that higher ed can and does play in building a better world. I'd like to invite Juwan to the mic.
Thank you, President Dorman. Lieutenant Governor, ladies and gentlemen of the Georgia Senate, I'm honored to stand before you today as the 76th President of the Student Government Association of Georgia College, and representing the 6,772 students at our institution. I want to thank you for this proclamation today, recognizing Georgia College and honoring our 125th birthday. Since 1889, Georgia College has been preparing students to go out into a globally competitive workforce. In 1996, that task took on a new dimension as Georgia College was designated by the University System of Georgia as Georgia's public liberal arts university. At Georgia College, our professors and staff not only prepare us in our desired field of study, we're also given the opportunity and encouragement to obtain experience through internships, volunteer service to the community, and projects that address real-world problems. The beauty of a liberal arts education is that it emphasizes breadth rather than specialization. Our students are encouraged to take courses across the curriculum in order to appreciate the interconnections among a wide variety of disciplines. I believe these students are then better able to help us clarify problems, create opportunities and options, and provide a vision of the possibilities of a better world. Our mission is truly important as we prepare the next generation of teachers, nurses, scientists, artists, journalists, computer programmers, business executives, and even governmental leaders. Many of my fellow students, leaders, are here today up in the gallery, and I hope that you will take the opportunity to visit with them and learn about the jewel that Georgia College possesses with the university that we have in Middle Georgia. On behalf of the administration and students, I invite each of you to come to Milledgeville and visit our beautiful campus, but most importantly, get to know our students, faculty, and staff. For these are the people who continually burnish the outstanding reputation of Georgia College. Thank you again for the opportunity to be with you today, and thank you for your continued support of Georgia College.
Excellent. We're going to get a picture down on the steps, okay? Senator from the 50th, are you ready? You ready? Yeah, okay. We have another resolution we would like to read, and the senator will speak from the well, honoring a special Georgian. Chair recognize, or excuse me, the secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 141 by Senator Wilkinson of the 50th and others, a resolution honoring the life and memory of Gary Chadwick Durrance and for other purposes. Whereas the state of Georgia mourns the loss of one of its most distinguished citizens with the passing of Gary Chadwick Durrance on December 25th, 2014, whereas Chad was born on June 27th, 1970 in Gainesville, Georgia, a beloved son of Gary and Linda Durrance, and whereas Chad had a loving and supportive family, including his parents, his sister Kristen, her husband Jay, and their children James and Adair, his aunts Louise, Mildred, and Betty. And whereas a compassionate and generous man, Chad will long be remembered for his love of family and friendship and will be missed by all those who had the great fortune of knowing him. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body join in honoring the life and memory of Gary Chadwick Durrance and express their deepest and most sincere regret at his passing. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Thank you. It is a real honor for me today to have the opportunity to stand here and make some comments in regard to the life and memory of Chad Durrance. He was a special individual, as you've heard from what has been read, and he will be greatly missed by all of us. I did think it was interesting. I've talked to a number of people. I didn't have the opportunity to know Chad that well, but I've talked to a number of people who did know him, and some of the things I could understand, other things I can't. I can understand him being a big Georgia Bulldog fan. I don't know where the Carrollton Trojans came from. But he was a Rabun County native. He enjoyed NASCAR. I know he worked at Pritchett Tire for a while. He had all the qualities that a true friend should have: loyalty, compassion, a genuine concern for others. Also, I'm very pleased that his parents can be here with us in the gallery today. Many of you know Linda Durrance. She's been very active in the State Realtors Association. She's here today, and her husband Gary. And at this time, I'd like for both of you to stand, and any other family members who might be present, and I'd like for us to welcome them to the Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The resolution is therefore adopted. Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th to recognize some special guests in the gallery.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I am so proud to have with us today St. Leo University students who are in the gallery. Will you please stand if you're still here? And senators, will you join me in giving them a great Senate welcome? Welcome to you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any unanimous consents? Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Senator from the 39th is back. And he is recognized for a point of personal privilege.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, is my understanding of the Senate rules that I get my 5 minutes from yesterday added on to my 5 minutes of this morning. But seriously, Mr. President, members of the Senate, a couple of weeks ago I came to this microphone to make comment on the situation with Blue Cross Blue Shield and Grady Hospital, that great institution that not only serves the poor in Fulton and DeKalb, but as I have been told, people from all 159 counties. At that time, I told you that Blue Cross Blue Shield had pushed Grady out of the network. So those of you who may have an emergency here in Atlanta who are covered by Blue Cross Blue Shield, don't go to Grady, because Blue Cross Blue Shield says you're not covered at Grady. I did want to say to you that last year, when there was picketing at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Buckhead, Blue Cross Blue Shield made a commitment to meet with members of the community, not just with elected officials, not just important folk, but regular folk, the people who are affected by their decision to push Grady out of network. They made that promise, and they have not followed up with that promise. Now, you can tell me anything you want. You can prevaricate with me, but when you do it with my constituents, when you do it with folk, who weren't elected but speak for the voiceless, that's when you have crossed the line. Mr. Morgan and his people said they would arrange a meeting. It hasn't occurred yet, and I know Mr. Morgan is important. He meets, he's $5 million important. I understand he makes a salary of $5 million, and that's his business. I don't begrudge him his wage, but what I do begrudge him is when a bully pushes around little people, and after they push him around, say they're not going to meet with them. We have made the plea privately, and I'm going to make it publicly to Mr. Morgan and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Don't look down on little folk. Don't look down on people who can't stand up for themselves. Sit down with him. Sit down with them. Remember what the Bible says, the first shall be last and the last shall be first, Mr. Morgan. When you pick up that paycheck, understand there are people at Grady whose paycheck is a lot smaller than that $5 million paycheck you get. Tell them that you respect them, that you're willing to sit down with them across the table and reason together and come to a conclusion, come to a solution with Grady. We implore you, Blue Shield, Blue Cross, to do just that. Come and reason together. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? You have a consent calendar of privileged resolutions that are before you. Is there objection to adoption of the resolutions on the consent calendar? Chair hears none, and the consent calendar of privileged resolutions are therefore adopted. Moving now on to the local consent calendar. Local consent calendar. We have a couple of local bills there. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, are there any objections filed on any of the bills on the local consent calendar?
Mr. President, there are no objections filed in the Secretary's office.
Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the Committee on the State and Local Governmental Operations, which failed passage of the bills? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. The question is on the passage of the bills. All those in favor of the bills will vote aye. Those opposed, no, and the Secretary will unlock the machine. You're voting on the local consent calendar. On the local consent calendar, the yeas are 56, the nays are 0, and all the bills on the local consent calendar are therefore adopted. Moving on to the general calendar now. Secretary will read Senate Bill 3. Senate Bill 3, first bill up.
Senate Bill 3 by Senator Unchman of the 45th and others, a bill to be entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 9 of Title 19 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to child custody proceedings so as to provide for the creation, authorization, procedure, revocation, and termination of power of attorney from a parent to another person for the temporary delegation of certain power and authority for the care of a minor child, to provide for a short title, to provide for definitions, to provide for legal findings, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting law, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to SB 3. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 9 of Title 19 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to child custody proceedings so as to provide for the creation, authorization, procedure, revocation, and termination of power of attorney from a parent to another person for the temporary delegation of certain power and authority for the care of a minor child, to provide for short title, to provide for definitions, to provide for legislative findings, and to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting law, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Read the amendments.
Mr. President, Senators Schaefer of the 48th and Unterman of the 45th offer the following amendment to SB 3 to amend the Senate Health and Human Services Committee substitute SB 3 by deleting lines 77 through 81, by deleting lines 106 and 107 and inserting in lieu of thereof the following. A parent shall not excuse power of attorney for the execute a power of attorney for the care of a minor child for the purpose of subverting an investigation of the child's welfare initiated by the Division of Family and Children Services, and the Department of Human Services shall not execute such power of attorney so long as the Division of Family and Child Services has an open child welfare and youth services case with regard to the parent, the child, or another child of the parent. The power of attorney for the care of the child shall be signed and acknowledged before a notary public by the parent of executing such power of attorney.
Amendment number 2.
I didn't read the second page of that. Or is it just the one?
Of all the amendments, one more.
Mr. President, Senator Schaefer, the 48th, and Unterman of the 45th offer a second amendment to amend Senate Health and Human Services Committee substitute to SB 3 by inserting at the end of line 149 the following. I reserve the right to revoke this power and authority at any time. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Chair recognizes the distinguished chair of the Health Committee, Senator from the 45th, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, it's my privilege to be able to have worked on a bill, Senate Bill 3, for the past year, and to bring before you Senate Bill 3, Supporting and Strengthening Families Act. And that's basically what the subject of the bill is about. It's a very simple bill that came to me when I started working on this particular topic of foster care issues in 2008. And in 2008, we had a bill that was a historic bill at the beginning of the recession when we started seeing parents not being able to take care of their children because of unemployment and family stress. And we created what became law, Senate Bill 88. And that was the ability of grandparents to be able to take into their homes and take care of their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. That system has worked out very well, and after being the chairman of the committee and after writing appropriations for the Department of Human Services and Behavioral Health and a plethora of other agencies, I've never had one complaint about how that system has not worked. And it revolves around power of attorney. And the whole supposition of the bill is that you don't have to go to court. You don't have to load up the kids in the station wagon and take them to the courthouse and the trauma of going to the courthouse and being presented before a judge and saying why mom and daddy or mama can't take care of them, and now somebody else has got to take care of them. That's very traumatic in a child's life, and it lasts a lifetime, that you never forget that. Unfortunately, children also never forget the incidents of divorce and the tearing apart of family. So this bill is allowing a parent or a legal custodian of a child to use a written power of attorney, which is notarized, to delegate the power and authority regarding the care and the custody of the child to another adult. And this is where it veers away from the blood relation of a grandparent to someone who is not a blood relative. This could be another adult as long as they're residing in the state of Georgia. As this bill went through the committee process, there were many things that were brought to the attention and they were incorporated into the bill. Most importantly, that parent can revoke at any time that one-year agreement, and it will be null and void, and those children go back to the original parent that has custody. This bill also is relative in that in 2008 we were talking about stress upon the family, and in the meantime we've had many individuals who have been sent abroad who are in the armed services, and oftentimes you think about mothers who are in the armed services, and I give an example, and it's just an example of maybe a mother that's stationed at Columbus, Georgia. She's a single parent raising 2 children, and she gets deployed overseas to go and fight in a war or just deployed overseas. She has to leave Columbus, Georgia for a period of 7 months. She could sign over this power of attorney to someone who she trusts and knows would take good care of her children. Those children would stay in the same school system. They would still stay in the same family home environment as far as their pediatrician or their internist or whoever's taking care of them medically. They have the same medical home. And that's the whole point of the bill, is to not allow disruption in the family, and to be able to have continuity, to be able to have that child stay in the same school system to see the same pediatrician. It sounds so easy that you wonder why we hadn't already have done it. It really brings back to me a memory I have, that's something that's an indelible memory. I was in Savannah, Georgia, and I had gone to the Savannah Children's Methodist Home down there, and it was when we were changing the Department of Behavioral Health system and Department of Human Services about custody and taking care of children that were wards of the state. And I met a little boy in Savannah who was at the Methodist home, and he loved the Methodist home, and unfortunately we were closing the Methodist home, and he told me that he had been in, he couldn't even remember 18 to 20 different foster care homes. The whole purpose of this bill is to stem the tide of the wave of kids that go into the foster care system, because oftentimes the system that you're putting them into is not much better than the system that they came from. So with that, Mr. President, I think the bill is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty simple. I do have 2 friendly amendments. Unfortunately, when this bill came through the Health and Human Services Committee, there were some additions, and unfortunately, through the committee process, no ill intentions, it did not get included in the transcription process. So the President Pro Tem of the Senate has agreed to do these 2 amendments, and I appreciate him doing them and getting these included correctly in the transcription process. So with that, Mr. President, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I do have some questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 41st for a question.
Yes, sir.
Senator, was there some questions about...
I can't hear you.
Non-custodial parent, would they be notified if a custodial parent would sign the power of attorney to someone else? would they be notified of that action going on?
Yes, sir. I appreciate you bringing that up, and that was what was brought up in committee, and that was an addition to the bill.
Thank you. And I think that was a great addition. One concern that was brought up in committee was if someone were to want to use this to manipulate child custody, they might sign a power of attorney to move the child further away from a non-custodial parent and try to interrupt visitation or something.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any concerns about that, or
Yes, sir. I do have concerns about that, and that was brought up in the committee too. And the words that were such a travesty to me was using children as weapons, and I never see children as weapons, but that was brought up. And I think it was resolved because we added an addition into the bill so that DFACS is the default, and that if there is a previous interaction with DFACS, that they would be notified. And I'm sure that if that were being used maliciously, that DFACS could be brought up again and be brought into the situation.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 43rd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, recently I was at a town hall meeting and a grandparent, requested that the legislature do something along the lines of kinship care.
Right.
And it appears to me that this bill gets pretty close, especially on page 4 under section 19.9, 143. So is it my understanding that if a grandparent received control under this power of attorney under this bill, that if that child were otherwise eligible for public services or assistance, that attorney in fact would be allowed to continue those services for that child?
Yes, sir. I'm glad you brought that up because that was brought up before, and I believe the senator from right behind you brought that issue up to me about food stamps and the services following the child, and not necessarily the family per se, but following the child. And there has been a backlog in food stamps, and we have been working on that for a number of years, and especially with grandparents, because once that child goes into custody and into the care, not custody, into the care of a grandparent, that grandparent should be be able to put the food on the table for that particular child. And it doesn't stay with the mother per se. But because of the backlog, and I believe the case like you're talking about would follow under that previous law, grandparents raising grandchildren, and not this particular law. This particular bill proposes a non-blood relative. You're talking about a blood relative, which is a completely different, but that is the grandparents raising grandchildren. But I have gotten complaints about that. I have talked to Commissioner Horton about it. And I have talked to the new director, Bobby Cagle. They're all aware of the inadequacies in the system. Part of it is fraud, waste, and abuse. I don't deny that. And I've talked to them about that, but it's the backlog and the food stamp rolls.
Thank you, Senator.
There's no other questions, Mr. President?
There are. Chair recognizes Senator from the 39th for a question.
Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you, regarding the DFAC situation, and I know there is there is an amendment that deals generally with DFACs, and I'll pursue clarification when the author of that amendment comes to the well.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wanted to ask you was, can DFACs, if DFACs is involved, can DFACs at any point, if there's an open case, mm-hmm. can it stop the power of attorney, or ultimately are they just giving an advisory input onto the situation?
No, sir, I believe you're correct. I believe DFACS does have that authority, and they would intervene. And they actually have been to my office twice to make sure that they have that power, and that power is not taken away from them, and they have no intention to try and change that current intervention type of system.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, sir.
Can I follow up on that issue? If DFACS closes that case,
mm-hmm.
if if they have a case, whatever the findings may be, after that case is closed, they can, the power of attorneys is not interfered with. They cannot stop defects at that point after a case is closed, would not be able to prevent the power of attorney from being done. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, but I also know that DFACS talked to me about wanting to be able to track these children, because ultimately the new director, Bobby Cagle, is ultimately responsible for those children. And if I were in his shoes, I would want a tracking too, to know exactly what is happening with those children, because if something does unfortunately happen, he's the one that's accountable and his staff is accountable. And I agree to that tracking. So if they had a previous intervention and then you had this power of attorney, then I believe that DFACS should be notified.
Will the senator further yield for one final question?
Sure.
And this, are there any background checks or investigations of the person receiving the power of attorney for that child? Is our background?
No, sir, but I'm glad you brought that up. And I have talked to a couple of other senators, and I am amenable in the House when this bill goes over there to agree to that and to have background checks and to make sure that persons are not on the sexual offender registry. And I'll be glad to work with any senator or any House member that adds that. And that was something that was not brought in the Health Committee, but I think it's a good suggestion. I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from 22nd for a question.
Thank you. Would the senator yield?
Sure.
This bill does not apply to the grandparent situation. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, sir. That's right.
So if a young lady or whoever actually went and did a power of attorney, believing they could do it under this statute, and lawyers make mistakes, and they gave this power of attorney to a grandparent, would that be automatically null and void?
No, that law is existing, and this is in addition to the grandparents' law.
Okay.
That law was so successful that that's why we're going to a non-blood relative.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, sir.
Let's assume that the grandparent was to get a power of attorney under this, get a power of attorney, and the year expires, and nothing takes place. On page 4, could, after that year expires, and then grandparent and mother or grandparent and father fall out, could grandparents then state that she has neglected the child because she did not come back and get the child, or she neglected the child because she did not execute a second power of attorney? Could they then take her to court? Let's say they fall out. Could they then take her to court and say...
I think you're supposed to ask the question, Mr.
I understand.
Senator.
I apologize.
What is your question?
Could the grandparents take her to court and say you've neglected the children?
I believe that the Senate Bill 88, which is the current law, would be the law that the grandparent would use. It would not be this one. Now, when you get into suppositions about grandparents here, grandparents there, give them one here, give them one there, I'm not following your train of thought. I'm not trying to be.
I understand.
I just can't understand what you're saying. At any time there is abuse or neglect, we have mandatory reporting laws for professionals that come in contact with that child, and also a fiduciary, in my opinion, a fiduciary responsibility of other family members if there's abuse or neglect, that you should report it to DFACS. And I don't see it as a weapon. I see this as a tool in the toolbox, helping families that are stressed to be able to have a simplified system. You don't have $250 to go hire an attorney to go to the courthouse and appear before a probate judge, or, you know, this is for people to have more access to deal with their own problems and to prevent children from entering into the foster care system. I don't quite understand your you know, the train of thought of going from grandparents to signing over to signing over to signing over. It's not to be used as a way to get around the system. and it never has been with grandparents raising grandchildren. And I can assure you, DFAC's monitoring these kids that are at risk, that at any time that this new system failed, and I can tell you, I would be right back here next year saying it's not working. We need to revoke this. But it's my understanding from crafting the bill that after 12 months, you have to re-up it. You have to do it again. So surely you would know that there's problems. And at any given time, the custodial parents can revoke the power of attorney and take those children back if they don't feel comfortable.
And would the Senator defer you for one final question?
Sure.
Would the judge's order have to address this, or would the initial part of the statute, I believe on page 3, keep his orders in effect? Would the judge's order have to address, a judge's order on child custody have to address power of attorney, or would, I believe, the first paragraph on page 3 pretty much keep his order intact?
Do you want to tell me what line you're talking about?
Yes, page 3,
57?
number 50, line 54.
Line 54.
Yes.
This doesn't interfere with any custody hearings, and there's no right to subvert custody hearings. So if there's a case in court, you wouldn't be able to do this.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I didn't understand exactly what you were talking about.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 16th for a question.
Senator Gill for a question.
Sure.
In lines 184 and 185, this addresses a parent. And many times there are situations with couples where there's arguments before there's, divorce or separation. Does this give a parent the power to give the authority to someone? Would it not be better, and this is my question as well, to have both parents so that we have at least unity of the parents when we're giving a power of attorney, because both parents do have rights and do have rights and authority there?
It's my understanding that it's the parent that has custody.
How about if there was not a custody issue, does one parent have the ability to override another parent if they're not separated?
No, because you're legal guardians and you would have to have both.
You'd have to have both?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand that this is a very interesting, and when you start dealing with families and love of children, that it's a very emotional issue. And I also think that that's why it's so important for the state of Georgia, because we do want to take good care of the children, and especially those vulnerable children, and children trying to prevent them from having to enter into the system. And I know that everyone in this room is very passionate about it, and I urge for favorable consideration. I also urge you to have favorable consideration for Amendment number 1 and number 2 that are both friendly amendments, and I'll be glad to answer or close out if there are questions about those amendments. Thank you very much, and I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 48th speak to the two amendments.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, it's my privilege to offer the two amendments before you at the request of the chairman of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. They both reflect ideas that were proposed and discussed extensively at the committee meeting and which enjoyed the support of the members of the committee but were not editorially incorporated into the substitute before you. Amendment number 1 makes clear that a parent cannot use one of these power of attorneys to subvert an investigation by the Division of Family and Children's Services of the Department of Human Services by making clear that one of these powers of attorney cannot be executed while an investigation is pending. Amendment number 2 corrects a Scrivener's error by adding on line 194 dealing with military service powers of attorney the same language that appears on line 187 dealing with other powers of attorneys, making clear that the power of attorney can be revoked. If there are no questions, I will yield the well.
Senator from the 39th has a question.
Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
While I support your amendment, I'm going to vote for it. I do have a question, which is how would it be determined whether whether the purpose of the power of attorney execution is for subverting an investigation into child welfare? How is that determined?
I think that clause of the entire sentence really is for explanatory purposes only. If you go down to line 6 of the amendment, it says that you cannot execute a power of attorney while there is an open child welfare and youth services case with regard to the parent, the child, or another child of the parent.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, sir.
After the case is closed, DFACS would monitor on an ongoing basis. Is that true?
I guess it would depend in, how the case was resolved. I mean, if it was, closed with, if it was found to be, if it was closed with some sort of finding that the original complaint was unfounded, I don't know that necessarily would be true, but.
If the senator would further yield,
certainly.
I'll apologize for asking that question. I believe the author, now that I remember, did say that DFACS would track the case. So that question.
I would defer to the author of the bill in answering that question.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
There are no further questions, Senator. The question now is on the adoption of Amendment Number 1, authored by the senator from the 48th. Is there objection? Without objection, Amendment Number 1 will be adopted. The next amendment is Amendment Number 2, authored by the senator from the 48th and the sponsor, the senator from the 45th. Is there objection? Without objection, Amendment Number 2 will be adopted. Question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection? Without objection, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection agreeing to report of committee which fail pass the bill? Chair is none. Report of committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair is none and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Questions on the pass of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed no, and the secretary will unlock the machine. Well, I declare our unanimous voting has come to an end in the Senate. I declare this is a very interesting caucus, I might add, in the no categories. Something like that. On the pass of the bill, the yeas are 43 and the nays are 10. And this bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Secretary will read Senate Bill 5.
Senate Bill 5 by Senators Cowser of the 46th, Watson of the 1st, and Ligon of the 3rd. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 52-2-9 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the general powers of the Georgia Ports Authority so as to provide for powers of the authority with respect to acceptance of loans or grants from the United States upon certain terms and conditions, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting law, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Economic Development offers the following substitute to SB 5. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 52-2-9 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the general powers of the Georgia Ports Authority and so as to provide for powers of the authority with respect to acceptance of loans and grants from the United States upon certain terms and conditions, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, completes the order.
Chair recognizes the distinguished majority leader, the senator from the 46th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pleased to present Senate Bill 5 this morning. Hope to get us back on that unanimous approach to doing our legislation. As you know, the Port of Savannah is our second busiest seaport on the eastern seaboard, second only to New York City's port. It is a vital economic engine of this state. We actually export more goods out of this port to overseas markets than we import, so it is fantastic for Georgia agriculture and other businesses that are selling their goods in the world markets. To accommodate a new class of tankers and freight ships that are larger than our current ships, we find it necessary to deepen the Port of Savannah, and that is a very expensive project to do. We've entered into a three-party partnership with the Corps of Engineers, the Georgia Ports Authority, and the Georgia Department of Transportation. This is a $705 million project that is already underway. It involves $266 million in state funds and $439 million in federal funds. This partnership is referred to as the Savannah Harbor Expansion Project. The Georgia Ports Authority Act currently allows the Georgia Ports Authority to receive grants and loans from the federal government in order to further their purposes of the Georgia port. And we can comply with any terms and conditions of those grants. One of the terms and conditions of this $400 and something million that we're getting for this project is that we indemnify the federal government against any liability that might arise from this project. I believe that's probably already currently built into our law since we can apply with any terms and conditions, but this bill just specifies that that might also include the indemnification of the federal government in exchange for receiving this grant. Mr. President, I strongly encourage this body to pass this legislation to ensure that we can go forward with this project and provide for economic development for the state of Georgia. Happy to answer any questions that might be asked this morning.
Senator from the 2nd, you wish to speak to the bill? His light's on. You wish to speak to the bill? No? No? Speak, right? No questions then, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 2nd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I plan to vote for this bill because this bill is not good for just Savannah, Georgia. This bill is not good for Georgia. Bill is good for the whole coastal region, the whole southeast region of this great United States. Our port is the second busiest port in these United States. Let's keep it busy. These ports feed the southeastern United States. We're the second largest containing vessel port in this nation. It's vital to the economy of this entire state. It's vital to the economy of this nation. When we include export products, we need the port of Savannah, and without this legislation, it will delay us from deepening our harbor. It will delay us from using our ports and putting together a very useful entity of our great state. So I urge you to vote for this bill. I urge you to make Georgia prosperous. I urge you to help Georgia grow. Mr. President, I yield the will.
Senator from the 47th, you had a question. You wish to speak? Chair recognizes Senator from the 47th, the distinguished Economic Development and Tourism Committee Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, it's always good to go through life with a wingman. Said my wingman happens to be the senator from the 46. Said he's a little bit out in front of me on this, and I really appreciate it. One of the things, Mr. President, I will ask that our body send a strong message to the House when this goes over and get us back to that unity. Let's go for 100% on this and send a message how much we enjoy the economic development aspects of deepening the port and there in Savannah. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The question on the adoption of the committee substitute, is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree to report of committee which fail pass the bill. Chair is none. Report of committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? All those in favor of this bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. The Senate's back on track. Voting unanimous again, I tell you, it's an amazing thing. On the passage of SB 5, the yeas are 53, nays are 0, and this bill, after records constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th, the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, February 11th, 2015.
Read the announcements.
The 12 p.m. Rules Committee meeting will be held in room 450 of the Capitol upon adjournment. The 1 p.m. Interstate Cooperation Committee meeting will be held in room 123 of the Capitol. The 1 p.m. Science and Technology Committee meeting will be held in room 310 of CLOB. The 1 p.m. Health and Human Services Committee meeting has been canceled. The 2 p.m. Higher Education Committee meeting will be held in room 307 of CLOB. The 2 p.m. Urban Affairs Committee meeting will be held in room 328 of CLOB. The 2 p.m. Banking and Financial Institutions Committee meeting has been canceled. The 3 p.m. Veterans and Military and Homeland Security Committee meeting will be held in room 125 of the Capitol. The 3 p.m. Natural Resources and the Environment Committee will be held in room 450 of the Capitol. The 4 p.m. Economic Development and Tourism Committee meeting will be held in the mezzanine room 1 of the Capitol. The 4 p.m. Judiciary Committee meeting will be held in room 307 of CLOB. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 6th for an announcement.
Hello, friends. Today, the Georgia Pest Control Association is hosting a barbecue lunch down in room 216, so I hope you'll join us. Barbecue. Thanks.
Are there any other announcements? The majority leader has moved that this body stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. We stand adjourned.